We are going.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I know this is one of the earlier sessions, so thank you for joining us on a Friday morning. We appreciate your time. I'll introduce myself and I will let my co-presenters introduce them, but we hope that you are ready to hear some good information. We hope to share with you about partnerships with our high schools and community. But to begin, I'm Kelli Antonides. I'm Director of Career and College Promise Programs at Rowan-Cabarrus Community College.
Well, good morning. My name is Daryle Adams. I happen to serve as the newly Director of Secondary Education, and I've been the Director of Career and Technical Education and STEM for Kannapolis City Schools, which is located right outside of Charlotte in Concord, North Carolina.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angelo Markantonakis. I'm the Associate Vice President of Academic Programs at Rowan-Cabarrus Community College. Daryle, congratulations. I'm glad it's good to hear. It's exciting stuff. It's like a live feed today. What I would like, as we start to get things going, one of the things that I would like to do is in your chat session, in the chat box, what buzzwords or what things did you see in our program description that brought you here to spend some time with us today? Let's go ahead and add some things to chat right off the bat. What words? Partnerships. Ooh, a bold partnership. Yeah. Student success, absolutely. Pathways. How to make it work. Amen. I love that. So if we go on over to our next slide, we have the opportunity to get right into that. Who are we and why are we here? Well, we already told you who we are, but today's goals, I always find it important to take a moment to get through an understanding of what today will look like for us. We are going to talk about the art of storytelling. And one of the things that we'll talk about later is what's it like when everybody in the room says yes? And we're going to get through some of those ideas and components. We're going to talk about dual enrollment partnership. That was the word. I even saw somebody bolded it and highlighted it and made it all caps and yelled at us already before 10 a.m., even 10:05. I've already been yelled at by everyone. I like it. The dynamics of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to move through some of these concepts and kind of get something well-rounded in place to talk about or start to engage those conversations. Daryle and Kelli and I are very open-minded too. If something sets you on fire, please put it in the chat and we will try to work it into our conversation with you today. Talking about our communities, who we are and what we are. That's what I'm going to do next as we move through funding processes as well as the fun one, articulation. So that's today. Rowan-Cabarrus Community College. Right now, we are hovering at 6,800 students, hovering, trying to get to that 7,000 mark. And we have a 60% full-time and a 40% part-time instructional rate. And we are just in a situation where we have on one side of we serve roughly a 22-mile stretch of Interstate 85. So on one end is Cabarrus County, and the other end is Rowan County. Now, the differences between the two counties could almost be the equivalent of a $20,000 median income. Programs specific are very different also. One is differently inclined with technology, and the other is also excited about agriculture and ag. So we have this vast service area, and in the middle is Kannapolis City Schools. So we have this wide variety of a service pool. And today we're going to talk about what it looks like to have those partnerships specifically with Kannapolis and what that looks like. In regard to the college in the service area, we also have the other pieces of our top 5 curriculums at the college is probably our associate, the associate in arts, the associate in science, information technology, business administration, And our nursing degree rounds us out in the top 5. We are roughly 60% white, almost 20% African American, and 11% Hispanic. And we are in continually working and working on opportunities to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion in our student population. From here, I would like to introduce Daryle, a newly minted, congratulated Daryle Adams, to talk a little bit about what we have in Kannapolis City Schools.
You would think after about a year and a half of Zoom, I'll know how to hit the unmute button. That takes some time, still some practice on my part. And Angelo, thank you for that introduction. And what I love what Angelo talked about was the demographics of Rowan-Cabarrus Community College. I'm going to talk about Kannapolis City Schools. And we're a unique school system. We're one of 115 school systems in North Carolina. We're about mid-size, roughly about 5,500 students in the system. We're lucky to have only one high school and one middle school. They're very large high school sitting at about close to 1,600 kids. Middle school is about 1,300. So we serve kids anywhere in CTE, career technical education, from 6th grade to 12th grade. And Kannapolis has become my home for the past 15 years, and I've learned to embrace this dynamic, wonderful community. What is interesting is that we're a city school system. So we're nestled in Cabarrus County. We're right outside of Cabarrus County school system. We're nestled between Cabarrus County school system and Rowan-Salisbury school system. What's unique about us is that we cover, as a city, 2 counties. So we're the only school system in North Carolina that sits in 2 counties. And literally, we have one of our schools split in half between the 2 counties. So one hallway is Rowan County, the other hallway is Cabarrus County. Then we start looking at our demographics. And what I love about us is that we do not reflect any of the counties we sit in. If you look at the numbers, you can see right now that City of Kannapolis as a whole kind of mirrors the numbers you see for Rowan-Cabarrus Community College, predominantly white, with about 21% Black and about 14% Hispanic. Kannapolis City School is different. We call it vibrant. Our numbers actually have changed since this one. We are now sitting at 36% Hispanic, 29% white, and 27% Black. So when we look at City of Kannapolis City Schools, we see an opportunity to grow kids of all ethnic cultures, of all backgrounds. We want to make sure that we provide equal opportunity and access to all our kids. When we look at the numbers, we realize that we are basically a school system that's called a BIPOC, Black Indigenous population. We're about 70% people of color. And we want to make sure that our kids are going to be reflected in everything that we do, including all our programs. But to make this work, we realized we had to create new partnerships. What I love about Kannapolis is that in our career technical educational program, there are 16 pathways that's open to students according to the Department of Public Instruction, North Carolina DPI. We offer 13 of them. So we're probably the only high school in the entire state that provides access to almost every program that can be offered to our 1,600 students at the high school. And at our middle school, we built it so that there are 5 teachers in CTE at the middle school. Our courses are aligned to be paired with the high school. So kids start getting exposed early. We introduce it to a lot of people, to a lot of opportunities beyond CTE, and then we pair it with what is going to be at the high school. But none of this can really be done without the strong partnerships that exist, especially with a diverse population that we have. So getting them access and removing barriers and opening doors for them has proven to be a challenge. But because of our relationship with Rowan-Cabarrus Community College, we'll see later, we're seeing kids who are first-generational college students across the board. We're seeing kids who are now taking advantage of courses at RCCC who never thought possible because of this partnership that we've developed. So I'm going to turn it over. I think is next slide mine, I believe. Sweet. So one of the things that we had to look at is data. So as we were talking about a partnership, and we're talking about how do we build programs and how do we get kids involved in dual enrollment, we first had to look at who we are as a school system. And what we realized, again, we look at our demographics, being people of color, we realized that our staff wasn't. So we were basically about 80% white and about 20% people of color teaching our kids, which didn't mirror our school system. What also was interesting is that we were predominantly white women who were teaching, the kids. Not saying anything is wrong with that, but the kids are learning through a different lens than what the teachers are teaching. So we have to make sure people understand that not all our students will be going to a four-year university, that they might want to do a credential, or they might want to go straight into the workforce. In fact, 44% of our students who graduated school last year went directly into the workforce. We have to figure out now, how do we prepare them for that next level? And then how do we get our staff members to understand the kids who are teaching are not always going to be college bound? In fact, they shouldn't be. We should create opportunity and access to kids in all areas and let them determine what is success for them. So a lot of this came down to we retraining staff members. We look at who we have, who we're hiring, discussing with them, talking about racial equity, talking about access and opportunity for kids and what is successful. And getting rid of, we'll talk about this later on, this idea of deficit ideology. Making sure that we realize our kids are asset-based, not deficit-based. So a lot of this conversation has been taking place at the school system so that when we do talk about dual enrollment, we're making sure that we have provided access to all of our kids, to the 35, 36% students who are Hispanic, to our 27% students who are Black, and to our 29% students who are white. To making sure that we have access to everyone, not to exclude anyone from this opportunity.
Okay, Daryle, thank you so much for the breakdown. And then I think that what everybody in this session will tell you, just looking through the chat while we're here, partnerships galore, equity and access galore. So what does that mean? What I would like, we're going to do a 10-second overlay here, and I'm going to ask the first question in the chat, right? So what I want you to do is think of a personal goal for where you are. From what it looks like, everybody's working on partnerships or some type of form of access. Think of a personal goal for where you are and ask yourself the following question for 10 seconds. What does getting to yes sound like for your goal? What does getting to yes sound like for the goal that you just thought about in your own setting? Go ahead and reply in the chat. Take some time or just think about it yourself. What does getting to yes? They can if you make the teeth smacking sound. What would it feel like? Solving transportation, understood. What would it feel like? So you're right. So smiling doesn't have a sound, but happiness has a feeling. And then lastly, I think you get the idea. What would it look like? What would getting to yes? So there you are, working with stakeholders, working with school districts and superintendents and campus and college presidents, transportation authorities. Daryle and I have a wonderful transportation story we could tell you. Expanding opportunities. Collaboration. More student success. Understood, understood. Now, getting to yes is where we start to talk about the art of storytelling between Daryle and I. And why this is just a quick 10-second moment to reflect and think about your current goals or what you'd like to do is that you need to work toward envisioning what you have in process. You have to allow for the growth toward the goal. You have to look at your community members, your resources, and going back to those stakeholders. Who has the money? Where's the county? Where's the funding? And who do you need in the room to start talking about the goals and what that would look like to cause the opportunity that you're working on? And what Daryle and I had to do, it was literally my second day of employment with the college 6.5 years ago. And the next slide shows what happens when you start looking towards getting to yes. I wish that Daryle would have warned me that day and said, hey, Angelo, maybe get an iron for that coat. I didn't realize it was so wrinkled, but hey, there we were.
Angelo, you should have told me not to wear the bib as a tie. So
so there's Daryle and I at the Wonder Welding Center, and we are going to talk a lot about what it looks like to gain trust, what it looks like to work on something that is a legitimate partnership and not some type of vendorship where it almost becomes parasitic in nature, and what it takes to get to yes. Let me paint the picture for you. It's my second day, and Daryle, this was, I think, 2 jobs ago before being promoted the past 2 times. We were both sitting in the room, and we were informed that we were going to be flying in this giant plane, and there sure wasn't going to be any landing gear. Go. And everybody demographically did the reviews and the research, and they really wanted to establish a welding program in a dual enrollment process and pathway. So there, Daryle and I were going, hi, I'm new. Hi, I'm new. And we started to work on our trust and our building of this friendship as well as this partnership long term. Daryle, did you want to touch on some of that process?
I'm more than happy to. And in fact, in this process, we both realized that for this to work, we had to work on us first. So we did a lot of things. I went to dinner, we hung out, we talked, we built a relationship. So therefore, we could actually have open and honest discussions. And oftentimes be able to air things where we messed up, and have the space to realize that everything's going to be perfect. And it's okay to say, we messed up here. How do we fix this and move forward? And I think for a true partnership to happen, you have to be willing to realize that mistakes will be made, but that's okay. Question is, how do we fix the mistakes and keep pushing forward? How do we keep getting to that yes? And how do we remove any barriers that may be blocking us from getting to yes? How do we go around them? How do we go through the door? How do we knock the door down? So a lot of this was a lot of work behind the scenes before we really launched into what we wanted to do. And because of that, I think we have one of the stronger programs in terms of with the welding, in terms of this relationship. A question was in the chat earlier, a statement about transportation. We'll get to that because we actually were able to figure a way to solve that problem. And we'll probably share that with you later.
So there we were, brand new. And on the next slide, you will see my attempt at making real deal marketing pictures. I mean, look at that one. I mean, I even caught the spark and the welding all in one alignment. I mean, I was pretty proud of myself. But this is just the way that you can see, like that's the setup for the first class that was taught in regard to, you know, the room and the setup and an open house, what an open house would look like, and having a prospective student and their parent or friend come with them One of the wildest things that happened, and this is all from free marketing. This is putting a quick ad in the paper, and having people come to an open house and come check out the program. The college, in a cool story also, had a father and son come to the open house and decide then and there that they were going to enroll and start working on their associate's degrees. But at the same time, we were working toward getting a successful marketing campaign for A.L. Brown to work and recruit within the high school setting their juniors and seniors towards interviews and processes to get screened and selected for the program. And you know, there's our first class being taught, and what a moment to understand that, oh man, we have a lot of things that need to be done from accreditation and accredited perspective, and what that looks like to be accredited and work through and need to hire a full-time instructor. And we lucked out. We sure did luck out on the instructor. That's probably the biggest piece. Is it's not many that can have a retired Army sergeant come in and be not only just stick-to-itive and accountable, and also compassionate and loving and understanding with individuals who are working toward their welding degree in a pathway. And one of the great parts is that the partnership has allowed for us to have an off-campus site that is accredited, and it's almost like the ability to have a college campus in the middle of A.L. Brown High School on the other side of their campus. So it's been a wild ride to get here and move through that process. Daryle, what would you like to share about our marketing campaign and the way that we moved through?
There was a question in the chat talking about a statement about a centralized location, and that was important to us. But let me take a step back before we talk about that. Is that on my side, I had to get the entire district to buy into this. So the superintendent had to be involved in this, and he had to be a priority set for the district, because we're going to talk about funding and how we spent money. And we had to align our strategic plan to this idea of equity. And once it became embedded into a strategic plan, it became easier for us to realize that that money that we're going to spend must mirror our equity work. So one of the things was in the idea of transportation. We knew our kids could not get to the site in north part of Cabarrus County. They couldn't get up there. So we had to figure out ways, how can we get our students we're a Title I school system. So we're looking at about 70% of our kids will qualify for free and or reduced lunch. So we realized we have a high poverty area. We have a transportation issue. So we had a building that was sitting there, old school. It was a school for African-American students back in the 60s, 50s, and 40s. Not really being used. So a superintendent said, why can we not use this space? We went to different places to first look and said, we can use this space. It becomes a centralized location. So we branded it the Wonder Career Center, because we're A.L. Brown Wonders. We branded it A.L. Brown Wonder Career Center, and we started building out of it. So any program we have with Rowan-Cabarrus Community College will now be housed in this area. Any programs at the high school that needs a lab, like our HVAC program or mechatronics, will be housed in this building. So now our kids don't have to worry about going to the community college site. The community college now exists on our campus. And Angelo alluded to the fact that we actually got the building tax approved. It's now considered part of the community college. So it's now being used by us in the daytime and by RCCC in the evening. So we found ways to really enhance this partnership so it benefits everyone. So I hope that answered the question about a centralized location, and hope you're able to touch upon the part about transportation. Angelo, anything else you want to add?
I will put us on the course here. Daryle and I have been chatting at you now for a little bit. So in a nutshell, and we will answer any questions as they come, because it's a lot of information. We are in a, just having 50 minutes to talk about how great things are and what it takes and how hard it could be gets you one part. And we're happy to do that. But we also want to get to the meat and potatoes, because I saw student success written in this chat a whole bunch of times. So It was Daryle and my job to get them there, get all these students there, get this instructor lined up, get the yeses that were needed. And now it was Kelli's job to keep students here and keep them there. So we're going to be quiet and let's hear from her on what it takes to create pathways to success.
All right. Thank you both, because you've done a fantastic job of setting this up and to talk about our pathways to success. I'm actually going to start kind of in the middle of this slide because Daryle has just given us a lot of that information about the transportation barriers. To give you a little bit of insight, the Wonder Career Center, where our welding is housed, it's about a 5-minute walk. So students, it's across the street, just a little bit back, but students are able to walk there. And we are able, one of the ways that we are able to determine and give students the path to success is that we schedule around them. So Rowan-Cabarrus, we work with A.L. Brown exceptionally well and just very closely to ensure that the schedule for our welding students, it matches their high school schedule, what they need. And A.L. Brown works with us to make sure that we have all of the contact hours that we need. But we also, it's important to build in, as simple as it is, build in transportation time for those students. So some of those students are eligible to drive, so they drive back and forth, but there's a number of them they need to walk. So we've got to ensure that we've got something as simple as building in time for transportation, whether it be driving or walking to get back to campus for their high school classes is really important. And so this partnership between the two educational entities is huge. If you don't have those open lines of communication there, you don't know how to talking to the right people, it makes doing that very, very difficult. But we're very fortunate that that transportation barrier was eliminated when Kannapolis City Schools decided to utilize that building and brand it the Wonder Career Center. Something else, and Daryle talking about the equity and access, and referencing that Kannapolis City Schools is a Title I school. Tuition and textbook, obviously tuition is waived through Career and College Promise in North Carolina. But textbooks are not. So students, typically it is the responsibility of them to pay for their textbooks, but textbooks can be very expensive. And so Kannapolis City Schools has really stepped up and they pay for the textbooks for their students, which is fantastic because that is one more barrier that has been eliminated for students. When it comes to fees, Rowan-Cabarrus has stepped in as well. So fees for those students are waived. Rowan-Cabarrus with Career and College Promise, if a student is taking 8 credit hours or less, it has decided to waive any fees for students. So those activity fees, the lab fees, they are not the responsibility of the student. And for our welding program, we set it up to ensure that those students are taking 8 credit hours or less each semester so that they don't have to pay for those fees, which is another communication and one of those ways that we're helping to break down barriers. But I want to talk about how we choose those. So Daryle and Angelo talked about, they were tasked with bringing welding forth. Well, welding was, the research had been done. Welding, there is a demand in our regional workforce for welding. And so that was a simple answer. But when we look at other programs we want to bring to the Wonder Career Center, we look at that workforce and we look at what's the need of our regional workforce. And another one that we've identified was information technology. So that is another pathway that we have there at the Wonder Career Center, and working and trying to build out these pathways that give students a really seamless opportunity and pathway so that when they graduate high school, if it is their goal to go straight into the workforce, that they're able to leave with a credential that they can present to their employer and say, hey, I am workforce ready. Here's what I've done. And that's really one of our goals. But I can't stress enough local articulation. And this is something that Rowan-Cabarrus, admittedly, we just began really dipping our toes into the water with local articulation, but it's something we're hoping to expand because it does break down barriers for students. Again, it really works to provide and create some equity amongst what we have. So Kannapolis City Schools and our other LEAs as well, we have a lot of things in common, a lot of pathways that we have on the high school side, they are also here on the higher ed side. And so when we can't always bring an instructor to campus, we can't always teach on campus everywhere. What we've created and we're working to create more is local articulation. So an example of that is Daryle. Daryle is teaching mechatronics at A.L. Brown High School. And we have worked with Kannapolis City Schools as well as our other LEAs in our service area to create local articulation for those students. So when they are working through and getting the same certifications that our students at Rowan-Cabarrus are getting, if those students choose to come to us at Rowan-Cabarrus, the certifications that they have earned at A.L. Brown articulate over, and they receive course credit for those articulations. But it's sitting down, it's having those conversations to make and create, to not only envision, but to create and make it come to fruition, that students have the abilities and creating these opportunities so that, hey, they've done the work in high school, the incentive, break down some of those barriers, come into Rowan-Cabarrus, you have up to a semester already under your belt. So that's a semester of money, of time saved for these students and their families. Is there anything else that y'all would like to add, Angelo, Daryle?
Can I just add, this is just fresh off the press, actually.
Oh, yeah.
When Kelli said that we are students who have up to 8 credit hours and the fees are paid or waived. Well, we realized we had some kids taking more than 8 credit hours, actually going to 9, 10, 11 credit hours, and we're accruing fees. We have decided as a system to pay those fees for those students because we want to make sure that we don't limit anyone's ability to have access to dual enrollment classes. So what we found out, because of high poverty, and not saying there's a correlation between high poverty and our students of color, they weren't taking advantage of some of these courses. So we decided, let's make sure that every kid has access. So now we have made a decision to pay those fees.
You are just hot off the press today,
Hot off the press.
announcing your promotion, and now the district's paying a little bit more for whatever they need. You got all of it covered today, man. I'm excited.
If we're going to be about equity, we have to do the work.
Kelli, I'm all fired up listening to you just talk about the components. I'm over here like, man. So from that side, I think just transitioning into the next slide is, okay, so you have all this going on, and now what's it look like to sustain and sustain success? And I'm just gonna hand it back over to you, Kelli.
Absolutely. I will touch, Suzanne in the chat asked, is the school system paying for the fees? And yes, Kannapolis City Schools does pay for those textbooks and the fees. But as we continue on, one of the biggest, I would say, just benefits of our partnership, and something that I would agree that all of us would say is instrumental, is our CTE directors meeting. So every single month we have Daryle, as well as we have 2 other school districts in our service area. We bring all 3 of those together with Rowan-Cabarrus, and Angelo is a part of that. Our Vice President of Academic Programs is a part of that meeting as well. And we communicate what is going on in each of our school districts. What are we all working towards? If it's something like local articulation, where all 4 of us, our 3 districts in Rowan-Cabarrus, are working towards something, we have those discussions. It is instrumental in maintaining your partnerships, because when there's a time when you need something, you're not calling up that school district and asking for something when you need it. You have an open line of communication. I think a perfect example was yesterday. I needed to talk to Daryle really quickly, something about SACS, and I can send him a text and say, hey, Daryle, do you have a couple minutes to chat? And when you have that open line of communication there, you built that partnership. You're able to have that type of communication. When those needs arise, we're willing to help each other. I think that if you don't have something like this in place, it makes that much more difficult for any of those asks that you need. And those asks are going to come from both sides, but we know that we're all on the same page. We know what we're all working towards at the same time. And so there's no surprises. And that's what makes that partnership. That's what helps build it, strengthen it, and maintain it throughout. But one thing with that is the advisory committee that Daryle has for his programs at the Wonder Career Center. And again, it's a lot of those same folks that we have, but it just ensures that what we're putting into those pathways, what we're offering, is in line with what's with the labor force and our regional workforce, what we can offer and what we can provide from Rowan-Cabarrus, as well as just keeping up with what the school system needs and kind of how it's progressing through. But Daryle, is there anything you'd like to add about your advisory committee?
I would also like to add about this meeting here, this committee. To me, this is the crux of it all. I think this is probably the most important community meeting I sit on. It's going to look different for different counties, different school systems. For us, we realize the CTE director must be part of it. You may have principals who might be involved, your assistant superintendent. So it's crafted to what you think is best of who needs to be at the table, who can say yes. Because it's at this meeting is where we really have those hard, sometimes conversations. What is working, what is not working? Can we do this? Can we not do this? And it creates a space to have open dialogue, to be honest sometimes. And when you leave that room, you leave with a stronger partnership, and you leave the room oftentimes doing things that you might think about going down road B, but you end up at totally C, which is beautiful. So we have sometimes thought about doing one program, we talk about it, we end up somewhere else, which was even stronger than what we originally started with. So if you could have this meeting on a monthly meeting, and I would advise it, please make it monthly, because things pop up quickly and often, and you have to tackle a lot of issues. And it's great to have that space to say, hey, we have a problem with FERPA, or we have a problem with a high school student who's a first-time college student. Mama wants access to grades. What does it look like? What can we do to assist this young person? This young person has missed so many classes. What can we do to assist this person? How can we make parents understand this is a college course? So there's oftentimes those push and pulls that can be solved easily in these meetings.
And I can't stress, I know everyone here may not necessarily be CTE folks. If it's more on the college transfer side, we work closely with our secondary directors, which just happens to be Daryle as well now. But sometimes those are separate folks. So just include whoever it is in these meetings that really can help push your partnership forward and maintain it.
And this is actually my part. One of the things for us at the school system, we had to make sure we talked about equity, and we found out that everybody has a different definition of equity. Everyone has a different viewpoint of what it looks like. So we had to ourselves, and if we're going to be funding something, we had to make sure we come up with a definitive statement of who we are. That's going to be our strategic plan of what we mean by when we say the word equity. And for us, it was simply this. Please bear with me as I read this to you, so bear with me. It is a state that would be achieved if how one fares in society was no longer predictable by race, gender, class, language, or any other social or cultural factor. So that means how can we get our kids to be successful when we take away things that could be a barrier to them? So one of the things we realized that we're gatekeepers in our areas. What are the things, some of the things that can limit access to kids? It's like that picture you often see with the fence. We talked about the kids on different boxes, and we say the equity is when the kids are able to stand together, look through the fence. But for us, equity is removing the fence completely and putting the kids in the stands. So we want to make sure we have no barriers whatsoever. So oftentimes, we try to tackle them as a proper. Transportation was one of them. We took care of that to make sure kids won't have a reason not to take courses. Textbooks, we took care of that. Now the fees, we're taking care of that. So because the district landed on this idea of equity, we have to make sure that we are willing to do the work and put the money to make sure that the work is completed and work is done. So we first had to define for ourselves what we mean by when we say equity.
All right, so Daryle just did a magnificent job, and Kelli just did a magnificent job of explaining, what that looks like and where we're going. Just because they have their books paid for, a way to get there, doesn't necessarily mean students understand or have cultural capital. If I wouldn't be able to be in academics without giving everybody a little bit of homework, right? So what I have here in that second bullet is a book specifically by Ward, Siegel, and Davenport called First Generation College Students. Some of you might have already read it. Please feel free to throw something in the chat, thumbs up, yes, or whatever. But what I want to mention is a lot of people will tell you that graduation is their favorite day of the year. Oh man, there's nothing better than everybody in their regalia and set up and hugging their family. And sometimes, you know, there's that picture moment, and they'll tell you that's their favorite. What's really my favorite and what relates to cultural capital is when you have a student come for the first time and they look like a doe in headlights. They're not necessarily sure. They're holding their paper schedule, or they're looking on their phone feverishly wondering, where is this building? Where am I supposed to go? By week 3, they have a little bit of swag going on. They know where the coldest water fountain on campus is, the best staplers are, the best computer spot, and they start to invest in where they are and who they are, and they start to understand what it's like to be dual enrolled or college students. What happens is that no one has taught students about academic institutions. What is FERPA? What is this information? What do you mean my student ID? How do I send an email? How do I even ask for help? All those questions are survival mode, and they can be barriers immediately for someone that doesn't understand or know anything about an academic institution, what that looks like. I told you in the very beginning, we're hovering around 7,000, I wish 7,000 students, and what that looks like. So knowing all of this, you start to look at and wonder, how do you get to success? And over here, we have it written as challenges. I would call it our areas of opportunity for the college and what that looked like. And what Kelly's going to do next is talk about how we navigated cultural capital in getting students to have, you know, success in success in action.
Yes, and I'll touch just on this slide. You know, there are still challenges that we're trying to address, and we've got some of those noted here. But we're really trying to meet students where they are literally at the high schools, and putting on, whether that's, you know, how you register, parent nights, orientations, going to the students and helping with that technology login and giving them the education of the importance of, you know, why you log in, why you maintain an updated check-in of all of your accounts here. FERPA, our textbooks and consumables. I'll touch on that a little bit because Daryle mentioned funding. So Kannapolis City Schools is providing the textbooks for those students. They're also paying for the consumables with the welding. So kind of all of that metal that you have to go through, things like that. They also provide some of the basics, some of the literal equipment that students have to wear, protective equipment, the PPE that they have. So the helmets and things like that, students, they have a set that they are able to use, that students don't have to purchase every single piece of PPE that's needed for that. But there's still challenges that we're working to address, and we're meeting that. And I saw a question in the chat about educating students about education, right, and maintaining that. And I think one of the best assets, and Angelo mentioned it, is our instructor. And it is, that instructor incorporates a lot of those life lessons with these students. He's bringing in, we did hit the jackpot with him. His name is Mike, and Mike really takes a lot of those lessons that he brings from his military experience and brings that into the classroom with these students, to educate them about what it is that they're going to do with this, why they are here, and what they're going to do with what they're learning after they leave, and the importance of those. You know, some people like the term soft skills. It's got a lot of other names now as well, employability skills, things like that. But that's what we're also trying to incorporate, and that's what that instructor is trying to incorporate. The importance of showing up to class on time, the importance of a handshake when it's needed, or making eye contact. Those are things that we try and we encourage our instructors to implement into their classrooms throughout the semester. There's not a night you can teach students all of this information, but it's really building it into the class so that students are hearing a little bit of it every single day, and it begins to sink in and becomes hopefully second nature to a lot of them that they take with them into the workforce.
Hey, Kelli,
So I do want to leave. Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead,
can I
Daryle.
add in one last challenge that I just thought about that has been hovering around us for the past 6 years, but we never really named it. As for people to think about is summer months between June and August, when the kids aren't around, but registration still continues. And what happens when the student doesn't fulfill what they need to do in the registration process? What role do you take on? So these are still some of the, we're not perfect, we're still building this plane as we fly it, but summer months was one of the biggest challenges we've had now in the past 2 or 3 years that we're still working through. So I can give you an idea that you all can have those conversations. It's not going to be perfect, but we don't let perfect be the enemy of good. So we continue struggling through a lot of some of these issues.
Yes, Daryle, that's a big challenge that we sit down, I feel, every year and try to address. We're getting closer, but we certainly still have those challenges. We have about 5 minutes left, and I do want to leave time if there are some questions. So I'll go through this. Our success in action, you can see our growth here, and we're still registering. We have mini semesters and things like that for fall 21, so that's why we don't have that exact number. But you can see we have growth. We took a little bit of a hit with COVID as is expected, but our growth has really been exponential over the past almost decade now. So we hope that we are building on that success, and a lot of that is in part with our partnerships that we have, and particularly with Kannapolis City Schools. But within our diversity, how we're really trying to address it is, of course, bringing those course offerings on site to schools, bringing, again, everything we can to the high schools to eliminate one of those barriers, whether, for transportation, parents have work that they can't get students to a place that's offsite, things like that. So bringing those orientations to the students, bringing technology assistance to the students. Again, meeting with our school districts, working with women in non-traditional. We have a large grant from National Institute of Health that we are working on. It's beginning to wind down, but we're hoping to carry on a lot of the things we've implemented through that grant that was focused on women in non-trad. So that's something we always have a focus on because we have a lot of room for growth in that area. Our Hispanic population is growing, so we always want to keep an eye on that and making sure that we are reaching those students in the ways that are specific to that population as well as other populations as well. And then again, we've talked about those textbooks and consumables. Our last slide here is some of our lessons learned. I know we've talked a lot about welding, but I did mention we had information technology on site at our Wonder Career Center where our welding is housed. But something we talked about, I can't stress this enough. Do your homework. I think we did a lot of our homework, but maybe not in all of the areas that we needed to do. And we had an IT pathway and we misidentified students. We didn't realize that those students were not fully prepared coming in. They didn't have a lot of that preparation at the high school level to come in and be successful with college level coursework. And so Daryle went back and did a lot of work to help prevent that from happening again. But it is a testament to the fact that your labor force may say this is what's needed. Everything may point in that direction, but if those students aren't prepared, that can cause a bit of a hiccup. And so keep that in mind when you're working on building these pathways out and looking. There are some students that are going to persevere no matter what, but you have a lot of students, particularly that may not have a lot of that cultural capital coming in and things like that, that they need a little bit of extra help on the high school side to get them prepared to enter for college. And that's what we're trying to do. But that is our last main slide. Our next slide is our contact information. But Daryle, Angelo, if there's anything you'd like to add on the past couple of slides.
Just on the lessons learned, I think that there's nothing more humbling than this realization that you are doing something good. And then, you have a student that has life happen, or they're not academically where they need to be, or different pieces. The humbling experience of realizing that this is forever on their college transcript, what that looks like. I can't stress enough making sure that you are collaborative with your instructors, your program chairs, your deans, and you have everybody's understanding and buy-in on what the selection process should look like for the students that you want to pick. and put them in situations to be successful. We've tried to paintbrush and broad stroke some of it, but at the same time, when you get to our contact information, we are excited to answer any questions that we can or work through that. But at the same time, being very cognizant of what that long-term effect looks like. Looks like we're almost there. Daryle, do you have anything to add?
Just very quickly, one of the questions was about the success of students. One of the things we do know, majority of kids either continue on at Rowan-Cabarrus Community College to achieve their associate's degree, and some of them went directly into the workforce. One of them is actually one of the top welders at Wayne Brothers Construction, where they send them across the country to do high-end welding. So we've seen a great success. Kelli, you want to quickly touch upon FERPA of how we handle that issue?
Yes, I typed something in the text in the chat there, but I'll let everyone know. So FERPA, our students sign a FERPA waiver when they do our CCP application. So that really covers a lot of the FERPA issues. We also take a lot of time in our orientations to address FERPA, as well as just one-on-one student meetings and talking about that. But having that FERPA waiver on the student application is huge. But that leads to another question. Someone's asking, how do you keep all your files and things like that with large caseloads? So our CCP application process is paperless, as paperless as it can be. So counselor, the application itself, counselor forms, any sort of waivers, all of that stuff is electronic. And we have our enrollment management team actually works on keeping all of that documentation electronic and discusses, and they have some shared files and things like that with the high schools to enable a little transparency with all of the students that we have. But I know we are running out of time. I see Victoria's popping back up.
Popping back up, telling you the 50 minutes is over. This has been fabulous. I'll show my appreciation to Kelli, Daryle, and Angelo, and hope everyone enjoyed this and enjoy the rest of the day. There's a lot of really good discussions coming up too. So thank you very much, everyone.